Hello, my little wormies, bookwormies. Welcome back to my channel. This ring light is giving me grievous after images. I'm ready to talk about books this afternoon, and I hope you are too. I didn't read that many this month, but the ones that I did, I feel like I have not that much to say about them because so many of the books that I read this month, I have quite long, some themed reading vlogs coming your way, quite long reading vlogs in general. I'll talk about them now. I will mention them to you. I will recommend some, and I will definitely recommend you to steer away from others, but how should we rearrange this month? Maybe we should go from the least favorite to the most favorite of the month. Are we feeling that? I have not even a bone to pick, just like absolute disappointment. I also cut my hand. It really hurts. The book that I did not like very much, sadly, is Catfish Rolling by Claire Kumagai. Catfish Rolling really reeled me in. It reeled me in like a little catfish. I love catfish, first of all. I think they're gorgeous. They're absolutely beautiful. But the premise of this one, which I heard about on Libby, my audiobook, local library, audiobook listening app, whatever, sounded so cool. It sounded like everything I wanted. Listen to this. If you listen to a synopsis like this, wouldn't you want to read it? Japan. Earthquakes have struck. Massive earthquakes. Earthquakes so big that they have managed to knock the earth off of its axis and change time, which is possible. But Catfish Rolling also deals a ton in magical realism, which also, now in Japan, there are zones where time either runs faster or slower than average, and we follow this girl who's just graduated from high school. Her name is Sora. Her father is a scientist. He's very interested in the themes of time and memory, and when the book opens, grief. They're both cocooned in grief. They're both really interested in these zones for more than one reason, and it's not purely scientific curiosity because Sora's mother went missing during these earthquakes, along with a bunch of other people in Japan. Like, they just disappeared, they were never located, never found, they just dropped off of the map. And so Sora and her father have been kind of trying to work into these zones. Her father does work for a company that does stuff with these zones, which may or may not be a little bit shady. Sora, for her part, is just trying to find her mother, while also going through that weird period of transitioning from high school to college. She's not sure what she wants to do. Her friend slash crush slash who knows, it's complicated. He's going off to Tokyo to university. She is gutted, and she's kind of just really alone in her grief. I love this premise so much, especially the idea that, yes, we're going to use earthquakes, something that alters time, and now we have literal spaces in time where time can slow down or speed up, very much adhering to the effects of grief. I thought that was going to be a really cool exploration. The problem with Catfish Rolling is that I had so many ideas and it didn't really roll smoothly with any of them. This book danced around, not really danced is too lyrical a word. It jostled around from idea to idea, jumping constantly back and forth without really tying everything together into a nice little bow. This journey is not linear, which is great because this is about how grief absolutely is not linear. It's about how memory is of course not linear, and so much of this book is about memory too. But for example, we would just have chapters where the author would want to go into a tangent about trees or different things in nature. Nothing was integrated well. It just felt so random. I really felt like the story was lacking focus. I feel like it could have been edited so much. It needed a lot of paring down or just like a tying together of all of these elements, because it just felt like this book was like stuffed full of things that didn't really connect to each other in the way that the author wanted them to. It was like a taco just spilling over. I became disinterested in Sora's story. I didn't care. This book does go in circles, I found. It got quite repetitive. The writing was mediocre, but I will say that I just love the ideas in here. I did give it a 2-star. Just was not enamored, and I was so let down because all of these topics sound like things I am so interested in, that I love studying. I love the play of memory and time and space and grief and sadness. There's a ton about mental health in here, but I just feel like none of it reached its full potential at all. So sadly, Catfish Rolling got a 2-star from me. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. I just needed a romance on a plane trip last month, and this one I thought was gonna do the trick. Okay, here's the thing with romance. Like I said this, I think a lot of times, I don't really enjoy contemporary romance. It's just not my vibe. I just kind of cringe. For some reason, when you dump it in like a fantasy plot or sci-fi plot, I will eat that up. But that being said, Take a Hint, Dani Brown is the sequel in the Brown Sisters trilogy. I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown ages ago, and I actually really liked Get a Life, Chloe Brown. And now that I finished Take a Hint, I can say that Chloe is still my favorite. This fell a little flat for me. It started off really strong, don't get me wrong. It did start off very strong. So if you've not heard of this trilogy, we have 3 sisters and each book focuses on a sister. So Dani is a PhD student teaching at a university. She's had some very unfortunate experiences with relationships in her past that have caused her to swear them off, make a vow that she's not going to get emotionally involved with someone, really too much with anyone, because she has a lot of walls up. And what I've learned reading this book, and so many others recently like it, I just don't want to read romance featuring emotionally unavailable people. I can't do it anymore. What ends up happening, and you know is going to end up happening because of the romance, and it's, of course, the formula is happily ever after, but by the end of the book, the emotional unavailability and all of the issues that cause that pulling away, that closing in, they have completely vanished without really too much work, too much trying. It's just like, oh, maybe I should let people in. I think that takes people quite a long time. I don't know, Talia Hibbert's writing, I think a lot of contemporary romance, hers included, verges into the territory of cringe in terms of the writing style far more often than I would like. I don't know if anyone knows Sophie Kinsella and her writing style. She's written stuff like Diary of a Shopaholic, I think, but it's that kind of writing style that just makes me like cringe a little bit and die on the inside. And that's totally the opposite of what a romance book is trying to achieve, and so I just end up, like Dani, pulling further and further away. But back to the plot. One day Dani gets locked in an elevator during a security drill for her building, and she gets rescued by the security guard, again for her building. And this is a very nice young man named Zaf. I think Zaf is just the star of the show. He's an ex-rugby player. He's gone through some pretty heavy stuff in his past as well. And again, here's the thing again. Here's like the little itch in my brain. I'm like, when I read romance, do I really want to read people going through intense trauma, coming to terms with these things? Like, yes, that's so important, doubly important to feature it in romance books. Dani Brown takes this to another level, which I really appreciated, and which you'll kind of see if you read the book, because Zaf is actually an avid reader of romance. But for me personally, I'm like, I'm not here to confront my own anxiety. I'm not here to confront my past, really. I'm here to have like a cutesy good time giggling, and I just didn't. So unfortunately, Dani Brown got a 3-star for me. I think for me this started off really strong. The premise of this one is fake dating, because a video is taken as Dani is carried out of the elevator. The video goes viral, and Zaf is like, oh my god, my charity that I run on the side is kind of a side job called Tackle It, which teaches young boys to embrace their emotions, to feel things, to be like, yes, feelings, I love it. Well, on the rugby pitch, again, brilliant, starts to get a lot of attention, and he's like, Dani, I know you don't do committed relationships. Will you do a fake one with me? And she's like, yeah. I made progress in a series. Are you proud of me? Chloe remains my favorite, but I guess we'll see once I get to Eve. Third best book I read this month takes this place not because it doesn't deserve a higher spot, but just because it is a non-fiction. It did not fill me with joy to read. In fact, it filled me with righteous anger, unbridled rage, and deep concern for the world that we live in, as well as my own body. And that is Bleed by Tracy Lindemann. I also found this on Libby. It's essentially about endometriosis care. Can I even call it care, really, after listening to this book? No. It's kind of like no one cares. No one actually cares. This book, more than anything, it's an absolutely scathing look at the medical systems, primarily in the US, also a little bit in Canada, above and beyond endometriosis, how everything, oh my god, this is just so upsetting. It's so upsetting that I don't even want to talk about it, but it's so important to talk about. The way that things are funded what branches of medicine are given priority, and this book also really goes into the power dynamics inherent in the system between doctor and patient and all of the old rubbish things that are still in place concerning women's health. And it's just brutal, man. Like, it's absolutely brutal. As you might have guessed, I picked this up because I have had suspicions. Do I want to call them suspicions? I don't know. Haven't come so far that I can stop gaslighting myself, so I'm just gonna keep saying suspicions for now, that I do have endometriosis. I have started back up the path, the journey, the long journey, because I think Tracy says in here that the average time to get diagnosed is, it was either 7.5 years or 10 years. Not from when you first feel like pain or symptoms, but from when you actively start trying to get a diagnosis. This combines a ton of personal experiences, including very deep traumatic dives into the author's own experience with the healthcare system. Like, it's just horrific. Like, reading it, I was like, no way did this happen. But like, of course it happened. What I will say is that this does take a very, 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 very hard hit at not the professions of being in healthcare, but the systems which educate them, which supply them with the funds that they need. And it's just awful. This book goes over things like birth control and other treatments that are always shoved at people with endometriosis because there is no cure. What I do wish this book would have featured more of was a brief introduction and like the science behind the disease and what's actually going on, because I think it kind of glossed over that, probably assuming that if you actually pick this book up, you kind of already know what's up. I think that would have been good, and kind of like the history behind that, because it very much does go into the history of medicine and all of the treatments and just women's health in general, and what an absolute shit show it has been for forever. What I didn't like and what I wish would have featured less in this book is the demonization of the period. There's countless adjectives, countless ways menstruation is described as demonic, awful, scary, frightening, horrid. Very much characterizes different organs as the source of all evil, which I completely understand, because when you're in that much pain, obviously you're like, this thing is the absolute spawn of Satan and it's decided to lodge its existence in my abdomen. I think personally it's not really a productive way to think about it, and I just didn't really love it because I'm just like, unfortunately, like, this is your body. I think we've had enough of demonizing the body, even the parts of it that are causing you immense pain. I think so much of medicine has already demonized those parts, demonized the body, and I think really what is needed is just respect and care for every part of your body, no matter what it's going through. It's already frightening enough to have this disease happen to you, to have it control your life to an extent, and especially to the extent that so many people in this book testify to. It doesn't create a healing environment to constantly be like, that damn period, what a bitch. I feel like it leans more into the feeling that like your body is not safe, don't trust your body. Really, it just needs to be healed, addressed, loved. Listening to it, I was like, oh yes. Oh no. It's so helpful to hear other people's testimonies, hear what other people are going through, to be like, oh my god, that explains that, I relate to that, I didn't know that was a thing, but now I know that that's a thing. It was just incredibly helpful. All in all, Bleed, great, wonderful. Happy I read it. It's one of those books that you're like, yeah, I'm happy I read it, but now my eyes have been open to more horrors, and it just makes you more and more angry, man. We're down to the last two books that I read in March. I, again, am making progress with my sequels, and I got to book 2 in the Heaven and Hell trilogy. This is The Sorrow of Angels by Jan Kalman Stefansson. Heaven and Hell has a very unique writing style. It's incredibly lyrical, incredibly beautiful, extremely long sentences, extremely long, absolutely beautiful. Heaven and Hell is about this young boy who is working with a close friend on a fishing boat to fish some cod. Along the way, he falls into becoming obsessed with literature, learning, language, poetry. He's like, oh my god, there's a whole world out there that I never knew. We live in rural Iceland. We're getting scraps of books and stuff like that. I am obsessed with what my friend is teaching me. His friend unfortunately perishes at sea, and he's like, that's sad. More than sad, it's devastating. More than devastating, it uproots his whole life, and he's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't live my life this way. And so he takes his friend's book, which is Paradise Lost, and he sets off on a journey. The second book picks up where that left off. What I will say is that I enjoyed Heaven and Hell, which is actually over there, way more. I enjoyed Heaven and Hell way more than The Sorrow of Angels. I still gave this one 4 stars, but it was a pretty generous 4-star. I think in this one, Stephenson felt a little bit exhausted, and I do imagine that this writing style is very exhausting to keep up. So much writing because there's no quotation marks for when people talk, people just speak, but it's just words after words after words, so many commas. But I just found The Sorrow of Angels to be a little bit repetitive. The boy gets to a location in The Sorrow of Angels, and I was really liking where we were. I was liking all the characters there, but we're only there for such a short time before we're yanked away again. I personally don't really like survival stories, I guess, if that's what you want to call them, like wilderness survival, but that is very much what a lot of this trilogy is. A lot of this is just literally trying to not freeze to death. Like that is this book, is trying to not freeze to death out in the cold, in the winter, in Iceland. We're just trying to stay warm. Not even stay warm, you're trying not to get frozen to the earth. I just found the writing as well, like certain sentences seemed to echo each other in a way that just seemed lazy, like he was just rewriting stuff. And the writing in here compared to Heaven and Hell, in that book I found it so beautiful, so lyrical, so new, so exciting. But in The Sorrow of Angels I found it a little bit trite, cringy, dare I say. And I was like, no, like Heaven and Hell never bordered over into cheesiness. I felt that The Sorrow of Angels did sometimes wander over that border into Cheeseland, and I was really upset about that actually. I found less to like about The Sorrow of Angels than I did about Heaven and Hell. So much about this one, what I thought it was going to be was the boy delving more into education, more into poetry, more into language. And like I said at the start, he does, and then we're kind of ripped away from that again. This one just felt like quite a long time for not that much to happen, honestly. It is very much about the journey. It is very much about survival, and in this case too about the role that language plays in these situations. Is language useful? Is language, is poetry, is prose, are books useful tools in these kinds of situations? Because everyone around the boy seems to be very practical. They're very much people of the land. They just say that they don't have any use, most of them, for books and writing and poetry, and he's like, oh my god, like these are the only things in the world. So it's very much this clash. I would recommend the first one though. Absolutely would recommend the first one. Please read it. There's just like nice little nuggets inserted in this series. He's speaking somewhat like a rifle because some words are like bullets and some people are like rifles. Then my favorite book of the month was actually our pick for the World Tour Book Club in March. We read from Zimbabwe, and that is Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga. I love this. Something about this, like I just didn't want to put this down. I don't know what it was. This is the fastest that I've ever finished our book club pick. I just found the writing style so addictive. Like I found it so addictive to read. The craft, oh my god, the craft of this novel is so excellent. So excellent. Nervous Conditions is about this young girl when the novel starts, but she's narrating her life, looking back at her time in Zimbabwe in the 1960s, 70s, getting an education, the struggles to get an education, which was, first of all, supposed to belong to her older brother before he died. So good, you guys, so good. The more and more I think about this and the more time that's passing now that I've completed this, I'm just like, damn, I need to read that again. This is also a trilogy, I think. I will definitely be continuing this one. I've seen so many people say that they're gonna continue the trilogy, and so many high stars, so many 4 and 5 star ratings in the club for this one in March. So good, so good. Thank you guys for voting on this one. This one is featured in a vlog coming your way very soon, so I'm not gonna say too much or get too in depth. We follow our girl Tambu, and she lives with her family. Uncle is kind of like the god of the family. Like he's very much this figure that everyone looks up to. Everyone respects him so much because he got himself an education. He's been to South Africa, he's been to England, he speaks English, he's got a big house, and he helps run the mission school that Tambu's brother starts to attend. And everyone like will bend over backwards for this uncle. She herself is like, oh my god, he's like a higher power. I have to do everything he says because he has this power of education. The thing about Nervous Conditions is that it's so, I don't know, it's so insidious, and at times it is such a quiet thing. The learning of this education, whose syllabus is of course put down from a Western perspective. Tambu gets to go to her uncle's school and begin learning there. Her and her cousin Nyasha, their dynamic so fascinating. Nyasha was my favorite character. I think she's just so complicated, such a wonderfully written character. Like I said, their relationship, their dynamic, so real and raw and startling to watch unfold. As Tambu learns more and spends more and more time away from home, she starts to really look down on her family, look down on everything. She starts to value different things. She starts to think different thoughts. Nyasha is going through a huge struggle because now that she's back in Zimbabwe, she feels like she doesn't really belong there anymore, but she also doesn't really belong in England, she feels. Throughout the whole story, you really just follow the narrator as she is gaining an education, but it comes at such a great price. She has to erase herself somewhat in the process. She has to erase so many of her traditions and the way that she's lived previously, and her relationships change with absolutely everyone. It's just really devastating. It's honestly just really devastating. And oh my god, the writing. When I find a book so addictive to read, I can never really tell you why. You just get such deep insight into everything. She's very much a passenger throughout it all. Women in this novel are absolutely phenomenal. I just can't tell you how good this was. And the more and more I think about it and talk about it, I'm like, damn, I want to read that again, because I think once you've read it once, you're gonna go back and be like, oh, let's do some things here. What it is to have to choose between self and security. What's all the fuss about anyway? It's only a book and I'm only reading it. So good. I'm so glad I finally picked this up. So this was hands down my favorite read of the month. That is everything I read in March. I don't think I'm forgetting everything except for, of course, Middlemarch, which there it is. George Eliot. George Eliot, please stop talking. Yeah, Middlemarch is a little slow going, I'm not gonna lie. If you're reading it for Game of Tomes, how's it going for you? How's it going for you, darling? Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I'll see you guys very soon in my next video. And if you have any recommendations for me to read, please leave them till my next video. That is when I will catch you. Ciao.